program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So today I have another great guest, candidate for U.S. Senate in the Libertarian Party, Chase Oliver. Welcome.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. I know you wanted to come on today because we had a few discussions about, current supply chain issues. I know you work in supply chain, and my background is also in supply chain. So I think we can talk about, what the issues are and from a more and what the solutions are from a practical standpoint. But before we kind of get into that, I do want to talk to you because I know just recently you went and met Andrew Yang, and I want to kind of know how that went. How after he announced that he was starting this third party, and you as a third party candidate, how do you think that went?
Well, first I want to say I think it was a great meeting. It was a great event. I think Andrew Yang is somebody who in 2020 on the Democratic side didn't really kind of totally fit into the Democratic candidate slot. Like he was kind of a square peg in a round hole amongst that group of candidates. And that was because a lot of times he talked about things like market solutions, and he's an avowed capitalist. So there's lots of things that I like about the guy. He's an entrepreneur, and he's somebody who recognizes that there are problems and tries to find solutions to those problems. Now, I will say, I'm glad he has dumped the duopoly. I'm glad he's starting his own party. I think, in a perfect world, we would have a coalition of a lot of different parties kind of coming together to govern. And so I welcome the Forward Party into the movement. And I'm glad that he's finally caught up with what a lot of libertarians have been thinking, which is like ranked choice voting is where we need to head. Breaking down the duopoly one brick at a time is a great, and I don't agree with him on everything, right? Like I'm not a UBI guy. Yeah. Though I will say there is that the Milton Friedman school of the negative income tax that is like, that's how I try to bring those UBI folks kind of more towards libertarianism. It was like, well, we kind of talked about this a while ago, but here's a different version of it. And but even though we don't agree on everything, it was a great meeting, and I'm very happy to see that he's trying to wake people up that the duopoly parties, the Democrats and Republicans, are basically two sides of the same coin. Andrew Yang is also a huge pro wrestling fan like I am. So I like to describe what the duopoly parties do as total pro wrestling. Like it's like you have your heels and your baby faces, and they go out there and they fight each other in front of the crowd, and they make a big bunch of noise, and they throw each other around. But then as soon as they get back behind the curtain, they're like, yeah, man, we really got over on those marks, and let's go have a drink together.
Yeah. And he highlighted that. Yeah, he definitely highlighted that a lot when he kind of announced this whole thing. He said he just couldn't fit in because it was like you trash these people on the stage, and then all of a sudden behind closed doors, you guys are like best friends. And so, which is basically, he said the quiet part out loud. We all kind of already knew that for a long time. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like it's definitely like ranked choice voting and stuff like that is stuff that we can definitely work on. I think he's actually become a big proponent and a big voice that has been pushing that, even if it's just more to his more left-leaning fan base. I know he actually had a lot of libertarian supporters. I have agreed with him on quite a bit of stuff, but UBI is absolutely, it's out there and it's more of a socialist construct. But for the most part, I think that he is somebody that we can work with. And the more parties, the better, right? Yeah. And it is funny you mentioned pro wrestling because you started the pro wrestling caucus in the Libertarian Party, right?
I believe I'm a founding member. I don't think I'm the founder. I think that goes to some other great folks out there, but I'm definitely a very proud member. And our unofficial world champion, Ashley Shade, she just got elected to office up there in Massachusetts. And Dan Lewis is a big, huge member. He's the guy who always, if you ever watch LNC meetings on the Zoom, he's always the guy who gets in public comment and makes sure to shout out the pro wrestling caucus here in the Libertarian Party. But yeah, I love that caucus because it's a great group of people that likes the entertainment factor of pro wrestling, but then we also recognize how much politics really is like that. And then, of course, we're always trying to get Glenn Jacobs to become a libertarian and to really join the caucus and really lead the caucus, because no one better than Kane to lead the Libertarian pro wrestling caucus if he makes that switch over to the LP. It's a lot of fun.
So overall, what are your impressions of the election this past week? I know there's been a lot. I've said a lot on Twitter, so there's quite a bit.
So I think there's kind of two sides to the coin here. I think first you got to talk about the fact that we have 150 new elected libertarians across the country. The vast majority of them, and even more, it'll probably be more than 150 by the time it's all calculated. The vast majority of that coming from Pennsylvania, who their state party utilized what's called the Moulton maneuver. Dr. Moulton up there in the state party and the state party leadership basically identified a bunch of races where they were either one candidate running or no candidate running in some of these races, where it would just basically be write-ins. And we made sure to field libertarians in those races. And so now we're going to have libertarian auditors, constables, judges of elections, mayors, selectmen council people. So we're really building, when I say we, I mean the Libertarian Party, but it's really the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania, who just built a huge bench of talent for their future elections. So now when someone runs, they can say, hey, I'm ready to be a state representative. I was already a mayor of my small town or my city. And that's something that voters look at and go, okay, that guy's got experience. That lady's got experience. And so that's a way I think, I'm just going to say it right now. I hope Georgia finds their own version of the Moulton maneuver, and we can start building up our bench of support from the local grassroots level of local government. Because I think as libertarians, at the end of the day, we want the most active government to be the most localized, decentralized from the federal government there is, and that is your local city or your town, the people your neighbors. I think that's the group that will most secure your individual rights. I mean, back to Glenn Jacobs, you see he's standing up against the OSHA mandates in his county right now. Good for him. So that's great. And then as far as the gubernatorial elections and the elections in Virginia and New Jersey, I think both the duopoly parties are getting the complete wrong impression out of that. The Republicans in Virginia are saying, see, we were great, and we just need to keep doing what we're doing. MAGA on, let's keep going. When in reality, their candidate was like the Republican who was trying to push as far away from Trump as he could while not insulting their base. And then Democrats, they're like, the reason we lost is white supremacy and racism. Yeah. And it's because people want to be racist in schools. And it's that parents really got turned off by Terry McAuliffe's statement that, you can call it a gaffe, you can call it a mistake. I mean, whatever you want to call it. He should not have said that parents don't have a control over kids' education. That's a stupid thing to say. I think it's stupid for anyone to say. I think parents have more control and should have the most control over education of their kids, period. Other than, the kid themselves who, I think at a certain age, kids need to direct their own education for sure. And I do love self-directed learning. That's a great model to create the smart thinkers and the free thinkers of tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about that too, is it was that he made that statement on top of the Attorney General now going after, parents as possible, domestic terrorists. I think those two things coupled together kind of created that perfect storm. And yes, parents are going to protect their kids on all costs. And I think so Spike was on Kennedy this week, and I actually have the tweet that I actually pulled from that. And so I just tweeted out this notion that libertarians can't win needs to be put to rest, because we went from over 300 libertarians to now maybe over 500. I said, this is how you grow the party. We have these grassroots, and we grow it via the grassroots, like we did in Pennsylvania, like we hopefully do here in Georgia. You pick these small races. I said the sexy races like president and everything like that, they help push the platform, the party platform, but the magic really happens in the local races, and that is they are the most important when it comes to your everyday lives. And I will also just say that Spike Cohen said, bingo, run across the board, celebrate the wins. So
absolutely. And I absolutely believe that school of thought, especially considering I want to be our U.S. Senate candidate. That's one of the quote unquote sexy races, I guess, one of the ones that push the platform. And we're talking about education right now. And I will say that if I'm the candidate who is on stage, on the debate stage with the Democrat and the Republican, you're going to have a candidate on stage who absolutely is an advocate, who's not going to talk about what government school is going to teach what. What I'm going to be advocating is that we decentralize government education altogether and that we get rid of the Department of Education. We bring that back to the states to create 50 laboratories of innovation all across the country. And, if I was a personal, if I could wave a magic wand and change the way education was, I'd immediately move to start decentralizing things. And the way you get to that is through school choice for parents. So instead of tying those tax dollars to school systems and to actual schools, what you do is you tie those tax dollars, for the most part, to the actual student themselves. So, and there's a way to transition this to where those who do not have the option to leave the public school system are still left well-funded, able to get the best education you're going to get out of a public school, while allowing people the choice. And the way you do that is you do a 90-10 split. So basically, 90% of the funding goes to the student and goes to whatever school they want to go to, whether it be a public school, private school, homeschool, whatever kind of school, Montessori, whatever kind of educational philosophy you want your kids, especially your kids, to be choosing for themselves. 90% of the funding goes there, and you leave that remaining 10% to go to the public school. And basically what happens there is as people leave the public school system, as they leave, because they will, trust me, in Atlanta, people are dying to get out of the failing public school systems. So as people leave that school system, those who don't have the option to, they're going to be left with that remaining 10% going back into the pool. And so each student remaining is better left funded per student than they were under the current system. So you transition people out, let them get right out of the public school system into those other avenues of education. And for those who don't have that option, who remain, the lights are left on, there's enough teachers to teach them, and they're actually funded better per student than they are under the current system. That is how I would transition ourselves away from public education, because once people see the market effects of education and they see the options out there beyond public school, people will make it a priority to get out of the public school system. And eventually it will not be an institution that's needed anymore. We don't have the Pony Express anymore because we have FedEx and UPS and all kinds of other ways to deliver. So we don't have the Pony Express anymore. We don't need public education if we can prepare get ourselves ready for a world of market-based, privatized education that allows parents to have those choices. That's where I think we need to move. But yeah, you will have a candidate up there not arguing about, is this government school teaching CRT? Is it not teaching CRT? I'm going to say, how about we just let parents and students decide what school they go to and what is taught there? That's the way to do it. That's liberty and that's freedom. So,
absolutely.
It is a sexy race, the U.S. Senate race, and I'm ready to get on the debate stage and really articulate the libertarian position and how we can get there in a realistic way, starting in the United States Senate by removing the Department of Education.
Yeah, that's what we absolutely need to do. I know there has been a lot of talk about that, and I actually saw somebody yesterday say, when somebody raised that, it said that those tax dollars should be attached to the child and not the school. Somebody said that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then it was like a dog pile on that person. Like, are you serious? Like, why are you afraid of the competition? Public schools need competition. I know even in a school choice system, like where I grew up, you could go to a different school, but they only had like 3 or 4 slots, K through 12, period. So only a handful of students could even go to that school. And we had a very good, highly rated public school. And then it's amazing because you see that private schools do so much better with the amount of funding that they get. And again, I can go back to Flint, Michigan, where I'm actually from, and say Flint Public Schools gets more dollars per student than just about any other school in the state, and they have the highest dropout rate. Whereas Flint Powers, which is the private Catholic school right down the road, they don't get any government funding or very little, and their tuition is not that high, and and they are one of the top schools in the state. Same area, same students, different funding, and you get a completely different result.
Well, and one of the untold stories about the whole supporting of decentralizing education and getting away from the public school system model is there's a lot of teachers out there who really hate teaching the system that they're teaching right now. They're teaching to the test. They're basically getting kids ready to fill in bubbles on Scantron sheets, and that's about it. And they're not really teaching the critical thinking skills and the skills like how to balance a checkbook, how to open up a bank account, how to start a business. These are things that we could really be teaching our high school students, especially, that they're just not getting because the public school system doesn't stress those things. And if parents had a choice and teachers had a choice, I think a lot of teachers would go to a school where they can say, you know what, let's teach real world lessons, things that are actually going to help people survive in the real world, as opposed to some of these abstract concepts that a lot of public school systems force. And you're right. And I will say some of these classes are needed. Right. There are some classes that are like, you're going to go to a four-year college or get your master's degree or your doctorate degree in something, and you might need to take these more advanced courses. And you know what? There are other people who might say, you know what? We need to teach more to trade schools and towards apprenticeships and real world labor. And I think there needs to be a world in which both those schools exist, are well funded, and parents can choose. And more importantly, again, students can choose what school they go to. You know, I think. Someone asked me this the other day. So when you decentralize, when does it become the parents' right and the students' right? And I said, that's a kind of a question that each individual community is going to have to answer. I imagine, communities like my hometown might be different than, say, New York City, which might be different than, say, the Inuit community in Alaska, which might be different than, say, a community in California. So again, the beauty of decentralization is I don't have all the answers. Those answers will come when your local communities meet. But I think I wouldn't want my 5-year-old daughter to be making every decision she makes about what school she goes to. But I think my 15-year-old niece, she absolutely should be able to help decide where she goes. And I think at a certain point, that's where the tax she should be deciding, not their parents. Yeah. It's her future and it's her life, and she should be deciding. Yeah. So there's a fine line there.
And Martha echoed the same thing when she was on here last week. More trade schools, more stuff like that. But it has to be. If you want to go post high school education into a trade, why not start while you're in school? You should be able to make that choice. I know there are some areas where they have. Like a single school that kids go to. That's what we had. We had a single school that kids would leave during a certain period and go over to this other school, which taught those technical skills, but it wasn't something that was highly pushed or even highly utilized. And it wasn't, I mean, you could almost take your whole senior year and go to a trade school, which would be amazing. So like you said, it's a local issue. I think what people forget is this is part of the duopoly kind of being exactly the same, right? Is a lot of this federal involvement in schooling started under the Bush administration when he enacted Common Core and all these standardized testing models and everything like that. That was the start of what we're seeing right now. And it's kind of coming to a head because now the Democrats have taken that mantle. So it's just another of the duopoly party politics doing the same things.
And the biggest scam is that what the Department of Education does is they take your tax money, and then they dole it back to the states. They say, here's $1 with $1.10 of regulation tied to it, of what you have to do and how you have to do things. And so what we're doing in reality is we're creating a system where you're both dependent on the federal government for those grants, but then also you're having to pony up for all their extra bullshit that they put into it.
Yeah.
So it becomes it's a very stupid system. And it's one of the things that I think parents are now finally waking up to. And maybe the one good thing about this 2021 election, because, I'm not really happy when duopoly candidates do well. Sorry. I want Republicans to lose. I want Democrats to lose. It's just the way I feel about it. But the one good thing I think about out of this is that there might be more people looking at decentralizing education in the long run. And that's a success. That's a good thing. And that's something that we libertarians can run on and actually take the forefront on and say, hey, we were there all along. Just like as the cannabis industry, right, is starting to open up all over the country, rightfully libertarians are able to say, hey, we've been there since 1971. And we actually know how to do it better than a lot of these blue states who are doing it because they're adding a bunch of regulations and a bunch of licensures. and a bunch of things that make it even harder. And you're still buying black market weed from your dude down the corner. So I think libertarians should rightfully also take the lead on these education priorities as well, and start becoming the thought leaders in the movement. So, and you're right, it does start with a lot of these local things. Board of Education. If you are somebody who believes in the decentralization of education, and run for Board of Education, especially if you're a PTA parent who's very popular with the other parents in the area, run for Board of Education. Help free your child from terrible schooling, one election at a time.
Yeah, and I think I'll kind of close out the election stuff and just say, absolutely, I think that was a big thing, is a lot of these Republican candidates, the reason why they won were because of libertarian politics. They were pushing libertarian policies, even though a lot of their other policies, and those were the big policies that were winning the day. That's the West. So it was a big night for libertarians in the sense of the policies that were popular.
Unfortunately,
sure that we can tie it to our party.
And unfortunately, the National Republican Party is going to get the complete wrong idea about it. Is now saying, "Oh, well, this must mean that we have to keep doing the MAGA stuff," and it's like that's actually the opposite. And exactly. if they were to actually go towards more libertarian ideas, that would be a better thing, I guess. I suppose that would be a great thing. I just don't see it happening on a national level. Unfortunately, they're going to learn the wrong lessons, just like the Democrats are learning the wrong lessons. And come 2022, I think the Democrats are in for a shellacking if they don't get the right lessons very quickly. That's just kind of my final thought.
I think you're right, and it is really interesting because you came from the left, right? I mean, I don't think that's something we should actually kind of address, is because I came from the right, so I see things from a little bit different lens than you, and you came from the left. Which is really, it's the best thing about our party, because we can have these great conversations and we tend to agree on so much, but you know how to reach people on the left. And I also know how to reach people on the right. And somehow we bring them to our party. And that's the beautiful thing about our policies, is it can attract everybody.
Yeah. What brought me to politics was being anti-war. And of course, in the time that I came of age, that was the war on terror. And that was being led by the Bush administration. So I was a hardcore, Democratic voter, pushing for candidates that I thought were going to end the wars. And what disillusioned me from the Democratic Party is probably their most popular candidate for president that they ever had in my lifetime, and that is Barack Obama. When he got elected, and he didn't close Gitmo, he started drone bombing more and started intervening into more nations. And that's when I realized that duopoly is just a joke. And that's kind of what brought me to libertarianism, because a couple years later, I was inclined to never vote again. I was like, I'm just done with this. And I was wandering around Atlanta Pride, and there was the Libertarian Party of Georgia right there. They were trying to get people in there to take the world's smallest political quiz and convince the LGBT community in Atlanta that they're a little bit more libertarian than they might think. And I happened to get stopped and talked to John Mons for a few minutes, and he convinced me to vote for him for governor. And that's where I've been ever since. So I really got to thank the Democratic Party for dropping the ball on being an anti-war party, because they got me to wake up to the fact that duopoly is a joke. I would have, of course, preferred that they were an anti-war party and actually ended some wars. But in the meantime, I'm going to fight for the Libertarian Party, which is the biggest and largest anti-war party in this country. So if you want to end war and death and bombing brown people all over the world, join the Libertarian Party. Go to lp.org. That's my free plug.
That's your spiel. Yeah. I mean, I was very similar. I was the opposite, though. I was more into economics and everything like that, business, everything. And I was a Tea Party conservative. And then we got all these people elected, and they were voting for big spending bills and all this stuff. And they continued to do it through. And that's when you start realizing, again, what do we vote you guys in for? Yep. And so that's why I started pushing more towards the liberty side of stuff. And then I couldn't vote for Libertarian Party in 2016, but I didn't vote for it. I didn't vote for the other two either. But on to other topics.
well, I will say, the other thing that kind of got me into more libertarian policies, I don't know if you can hear the siren around me, but the other thing that got me more into libertarian policies is criminal justice reform. And, we're talking about these sexy races, these platform pushing races. And I got to run for Congress last year in a special election because, I live here. At the time I lived in Atlanta, and John Lewis had passed away. So they had a special election fill his term. And so I jumped in. I was the Libertarian candidate in a field of 7 candidates, all of them being Democrat or Democrat leaning.
Yeah.
And I made sure that throughout that race, I pushed our platform hard on criminal justice. And one of the things that happened throughout that race, and you can even see it if you go really back and look through like some of the forums and debates that I did, they're on Zoom. And a lot of times it's like what I call the Brady Bunch view, where you can see everybody. It's like a grid of 9 people. And when I'm speaking a lot of the time, people are nodding their head like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. End qualified immunity. Yeah. Let's end cash bail, because it is a 2-tier justice system. You know, let's start ending the drug war. Let's end no-knock raids. Like, these things that I fought for, a lot of people were agreeing with. No one was talking about ending cash bail in that race until I started talking about it. And then throughout the race, in forums, it would be like, okay, let's talk about criminal justice reform, including ending cash bail. And that became a topic of conversation. And it pushed the candidates who were there, I think, to be more forceful on criminal justice and to actually push those platforms, because they didn't want to lose their audience. They didn't want to lose their voters. And so they said, oh man, this libertarian's coming in talking a lot about these things that people have been marching in the streets for. We got to start talking about it too. And so one of the things you can do with these more high profile platform pushing races is actually push the duopoly candidates to promise to say things and then that are more libertarian than they meant to be. And then you got to hold them accountable if and when they do get elected, right? If you don't win the race, you have to hold them accountable and say, you said during that debate to the Libertarian candidate you were going to do this. Are you a liar? And that's how you can push the politics, even if you don't necessarily win the race. You can push the discussion and you push the Overton window towards liberty. And that's one of the things I think all candidates, statewide, presidential candidates, we need to be pushing that Overton window. And I think Spike and Joe, to a great effect, did the best they could in an age of pandemic campaigning to push the Overton window a little bit more towards liberty. So I thought the 2020 campaign, while we didn't get as many votes as 2016, I think we got a lot more impactful voters and volunteers and people who are going to be in it for the long haul. So that makes me excited.
And to my audience who knows how much I love this, what you just mentioned and how you did that, get them to agree to stuff and then hammer them when they don't. That is Saul Alinsky's, I think it's rule number 3 or 5. I know what 4, it could fall under number 4, but that is perfect.
No, that's a lesson I learned from John. So
yeah, you have to learn their tactics, and Saul Alinsky has the rule book, and just using that rule book against them is rule number 4. So and you know, that lesson was taught to me by John Mons when he ran for governor. He got the other candidate for governor at the time to basically agree to Sunday sales if it came to his desk, that he would support Sunday sales of alcohol, even though at the time a lot of the Republican base was what I like to call Sunday prohibitionists, people who thought, if we don't sell alcohol on Sunday, nobody will be a drunk on Sunday, which is the dumbest thing ever. It just makes bars, I don't know, it just makes grocery stores lose a lot of money. Anyways, so so that lesson there is always, even if you don't win the race, make sure that you're pushing the discussion in the direction you want to go to. Overton window towards liberty. And absolutely.
And I think
it's how socialists have gotten what they've wanted for so long, because they have infiltrated the Democrat Party, and even though they're not winning these votes, they're not winning on these bills aren't getting passed, they're slowly shifting people's tolerance of them and pulling people to that side. It's why we see so many Republicans who would normally be Democrats, you know, like that's what happens. That's why you're running against possibly running against a former Democrat.
Well, it was Herschel Walker. Was Herschel Walker a former Democrat?
Oh,
you're thinking of Vernon Jones.
I was thinking of Vernon Jones. Yes.
Now I will say this. Let me just say this. I live in DeKalb County, where Vernon Jones was the CEO of DeKalb County. And let me just say this. If you look up corrupt Democrat in the dictionary, there's a picture of Vernon Jones right there. That man, I cannot think of it's the weirdest Democrat for Republicans to get behind, because the man is a pro-life, pro-welfare spending, or pro-choice rather. He was pro-choice. I don't know if he's pro-life now, but dude is he's a crazy dude. I would not I don't understand why the MAGA base is all of a sudden in love with him, other than the fact that he just parrots whatever Donald Trump says. And I guess that's what a certain segment of that party's base is requiring nowadays, which is kind of sad. It's just as sad as the base in the Democratic Party that's just going to swallow whatever Kamala Harris and Joe Biden feed them, even though, like, let's be real, like they would be laughed out of the room 20 years ago out of the Democratic Party with some of the positions.
Joe Biden's not feeding them anything right now.
Well, Kamala Harris is
keep his shit together.
Yeah, I don't think he runs in 4 years. I think they're going to try to push Kamala Harris in 4 years, but I
think you're right.
God. And honestly, whoever it is in the Libertarian Party, I really hope they get on a debate stage with her, because I mean that would make the Tulsi 2020 massacre look like nothing. Tulsi used to be my favorite Democrat.
Well, for everybody that they're saying in the Libertarian Party who could possibly be on that stage, all the top people that you're seeing being put out there, any one of them would just light her up. And it wouldn't be fair. Mm-hmm.
I relish that chance, like, to see someone get on a debate stage with Kamala Harris, who's a well-versed libertarian who can spit some fire. Anyway. So
let's move on. Move on to the supply chain issues, because I know that's what you're here for.
Yeah.
So your background, what's like your day job besides politics is working in supply chain, correct?
Yeah. So I work in the customer service side of things. So I actually deal with a lot of the people who are on the operations side of it. But I work in the customer service sector for a very large container shipping liner company, basically oceanic shipping. So they take the metal boxes, they put them on the boats, and they bring them from port to port. And in our country, they'll even help facilitate them moving on the rail. And so I have, luckily, I do not work in the LA and Long Beach sector, because they're their own thing due to different regulations out in California. But and that's where the worst of it is. That's where they have like 70 ships off the coast right now. But I do deal with the stresses of the supply chain from that point of view, from the customer who is trying to get their container. I feel their stress all the time. And so it's an issue where I think a lot of people just like to try to ascribe like a simple, like, oh, it's government. Good. It's just government. Government's the screwed up. And it's like, yes, I guess that's a bumper sticker, but like, there's really a lot of nuance, especially into what's going on right now. What's going on right now is kind of an unprecedented perfect storm of supply chain interruption. And while I'm not one to usually say, like, let's use big government, there is things that we can do, certainly, to get government out of the way, or for government to use its power a little bit better to fix this issue. And a lot of that, and if you want a really good primer for what's going on, the CEO of a company called Flexport, his name's Ryan Peterson. He's on Twitter. He had a Twitter thread that's kind of gone viral. And this is one that he's done later on. This is basically a great visualization. It's a great picture of what is basically going on. It's like a total cycle here. So, and I liken it a lot to a relay race. So imagine you're running a relay race, right? And you're there, like you're there with a baton, but the other person's not there or ready to take the baton. The race slows down, everything slows down. So first and foremost, what happened is we all went on lockdown last year. And through a combination of businesses closing, a lot of people were at home, or a lot of people were working from home. And people stopped going places. They stopped going to concerts. They stopped going to movies. They stopped going to restaurants. And they started buying things. They had cash and they needed office furniture for their new home office, or they needed a piece of exercise equipment because they can't go to the gym, or they wanted a nice surround sound because they're not going to the movie theater anytime soon. So they wanted to have that movie theater experience at home, or whatever. They need to buy school supplies for the kids who are learning from home, whatever it is. But whatever happened, due to lockdown, consumer spending went up a lot on actual physical goods. And then this was also spurred by the fact that we got stimulus cash too. So like a lot of people were like, I can't go on vacation with this $1,200, but I can buy a really nice couch or a new mattress or whatever they wanted with that, right? And so naturally, spending on physical goods went up. And so what we're seeing now is more things are being brought into this country especially from China, but from all over the world. World trade is moving goods at a much higher rate than it used to. And at the same time, due to COVID and labor restrictions, there are less people to handle moving them off. So that's start one. So more shipments have left manufacturing hubs to come to the ports. And then truckers cannot pick up the containers from the port as fast as they're arriving, because now we all have all these new goods coming in at this exponential rate. And so what happens is containers then start piling up at the port itself, and there's no more room to take them off. So then the cranes stop moving. Cranes stop taking things off the ships. When that happens, well, the ships are slow to unload. And they're also slow to get new containers to come on and haul the old, the empty containers away. Mm-hmm. So now the cranes aren't moving. The ships are now stalling. They're not unloading fast enough. So now the ships are piling up. And ports restrict the returns of empty containers because they have no space. Their ports are full of full containers that they need to get out of there before they can bring back the empty containers to return to Asia to then fill back up again. That's how it normally goes, right? We bring in full containers, and a certain number of empties leave on the boats to go back over to Asia to be filled again. So full containers can't be picked up because trucks need chassis to move them. And the chassis aren't available because there's only so many places they can put containers. And so now they're putting full containers on chassis, and the chassis are just sitting there in a yard because there aren't enough trucks to move it all. And so now the lines of ships are growing. So now where we have 70 ships off the coast, hundreds of thousands of containers, tens of billions of dollars worth of goods. And of course, stores and warehouses are now running out of inventory and having to raise prices because the price of shipping is going up, but also because of the lack of inventory, demand is going up and supply is down because we just cannot get the supplies into the stores quick enough. So it's this perfect storm. And there are ways to alleviate this. One of the ways, and there are ways to not alleviate this. And I'm going to tell you really big about the not one in a second. And it's a very important not. But the ways we can alleviate this is, first off, we can undo regulations that are unneeded. Like in LA and Long Beach, until recently, you could only stack 2 containers high in your yard. And they recently upped that to 4. Really, we need that up to 6 or 8. We need to really up the holding capacity of our container yards. It will lead to have to have more logistics in how you pull them. It will take more time to pull containers, but we need to actually physically put containers somewhere. The other thing that this guy, Ryan from Flexport, and this is where the government gets involved, and libertarians might not be super happy to hear this, but we have to break this bottleneck. If we don't break this bottleneck, we're going to have a real economic collapse on our hands. And so there is time where we can say, you know what? The National Guard has a lot of chassis, and they got a lot of people who are licensed to drive CDL trucks. We need to start insisting that every person in the National Guard, we need to start mobilizing them as truck drivers, and we need to start moving these containers out of the bottleneck. It is a cost to taxpayers. The higher cost to taxpayers is to let this bottleneck happen and the economy to collapse sometime first quarter next year. We have to start pushing these containers out of the way. The other thing that this guy from Flexport pushes, and I don't know how realistic it is for there to be a piece of federal land that's big enough to hold a bunch of containers somewhere near a rail line, and to basically designate that as a new federal container yard, and just have rail cars move, say it's 150 miles off the coast. Just only have rail moving that 150 miles, moving containers from that 150 miles back and forth. As opposed to right now, they're moving containers from LA 1,200 miles to Dallas and having to come back. And if you move them off the port, you can break the bottleneck at the cranes. And you keep the cranes moving. So there are steps we can take, some of which do involve government intervention to break the bottleneck. So but one of the things we can do first is in the regulation of stacking containers. And that's one of the things that LA and Long Beach have started doing, but they can expand upon that.
That's what's interesting to me, is because I think when we were in the military, we were allowed to stack 3 high, if I remember correctly. I think it was 3 high overseas. But I think that was more of a crane issue because it was we only had forklifts and stuff like that. We didn't have cranes that could actually lift that high, so it got dangerous to even go up there and try to hook up and do all that stuff. And I think as much as, because my background is military logistics, I was a logistics officer in the Army for 7 years. Well, I think that yes, those logistics officers could absolutely handle this. It would have to come with deregulation, because most people don't know this. Military 88 mics in the military are not CDL certified. Most of them have to get CDL certified to get out. Yeah, so there would have to be deregulation to say, if you have a military driver's license that has these types of low boys and stuff like that on there, you can go ahead and do this. So it's going to take that type of deregulation too.
Yeah, and you know what? That is that's something that could probably be done, you know, and especially in an emergency situation like this.
Yeah,
that's something that can be looked at, right? That's deregulation. That's getting the government out of the way and getting the containers to move. The other thing is that LA and Long Beach, again, with the ports of LA and Long Beach, they're now stressing them to stay open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is basically how every other major port in the world works. It's due to labor and union regulations that they are only open 5 days a week for the whatever it is hours a day, not 24 hours a day. So that's another area where I'm sure labor unions are not very happy about it. But if we could just join the rest of the world and having 24/7 ports, that might help move things along as well.
Yep.
And then
in my video, I stress more the fact is how we got into this mess. And it was government that got us into this mess. And there has to be some deregulation to come out of there to get us out of this mess. It's not like we can just get rid of Port Authority right now and say, oh, you're good, and we'll just take it over privately and get us out of this mess. Government's going to have to work to do that right now. But it was also you that showed me that private companies and stuff like that are starting to do their own ports and stuff like that, with Amazon open up in New Jersey and everything like that.
Well, and then, you know, they say Walmart and Costco, they're starting to charter their own ships. And then the thing that I've heard is someone said, you know, it's only a matter of time before Amazon decides to open up their own ports and starts to do their own dredging.
Well, they got the airport. They got the airport in Newark.
Yeah, so that's why. And it's only a matter of time before they have a seaport one day. Now, here's let's talk about the big the thing that they should not do, that will not fix things, that will only make things worse, more expensive for the consumer in the end. Do not do this. Now, this rule will go into effect on the 15th unless people can convince LA and Long Beach to not do it, because this is attacks on all American businesses and consumers. What they're trying to do is put fees into effect for not picking up your container at the time or on time at these ports will go up by $100 every day. So by day 30, the charge is $46,500 per container. That is an exponential price growth. And if you think that the Walmarts and the Costco's and the Amazons and whoever is buying these containers, all the businesses that are getting these containers, are just going to absorb that cost, that's a fallacy. I have beachfront property in Arizona to sell you, because no, they're going to pass that cost onto you, the consumer. So when the Port Authority is doing this to make a little extra scratch out of this supply chain crisis, what they're doing is they're taxing every single American business, and by extension, every single American consumer. That's you, me, your mom, your dad, your grandma. Everybody is going to be paying more for things in a time when the dollar is being inflated and it's actually buying less. So I encourage everyone who is watching this to get in touch with the governments of LA and Long Beach and encourage them to pressure the Port Authority to not impose these fees, because frankly, we cannot afford them at this time. We have other things to spend our money on than the back end fees at LA and Long Beach, which, you know, I'm just saying, I don't think these fees are going to move things. It's not going to make magically more trucks appear. It's not going to magically make more train cars suddenly appear. You know,
no, it's just going to make more of this. Some pictures I saw of some of the people that were stocking shelves, posting pictures of what inflation really looks like.
It sucks. So unless you're getting a 5.9% raise this year, you actually got a pay cut based on how much your dollar spends so far.
Yeah.
So just remember that, people. And part of this is the fact that it is more expensive to move things right now because of the supply chain issue. Now, the certain part of this is the market, right? The market should be having things more expensive as there's more demand and less supply. And overall, eventually this will encourage people to buy larger fleets of trucks, hire more truckers, bring about more rail cars. Over the long haul, a market will, and it will also slow consumer spending. They'll say, whoa, you guys are heating the market up too much with all this. Slow down. That is a market thing that's going to happen. But what's happening right now is it's going to get exponentially worse if we just impose fees that are basically a tax on every single consumer in this country. We need to be trying to make trade less expensive and more efficient. Things like ending the Jones Act, not going to really help here, but in the long run, something we can do in shipping to make products cheaper for those who live in Puerto Rico and on the islands and other territories. It is a crisis. But I hope that people look at this and then when they look at that little chart right there, they understand it's not as simple as like, well, just cut one thing out. It's like there's a lot of things that have to go into this, and it's not going to solve itself completely. There will be a little bit of a reprieve in February when they have Chinese New Year, because they close the factories for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So for 2 weeks, there's not going to be stuff getting made and shipped out. So there'll be a little bit of a reprieve there, but I really don't see this completely clearing up until well into 2023. So what I encourage people to do is to shop wise, shop smart, and don't hoard. Hoarding is stupid, but do make sure that you have the necessities you need before you kind of spend on things you don't need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing too is other states, Texas for one, has been like, hey, we got ports open, send here. Same with most of the East Coast states. One of the ways that they could do this is to open up the canal for the Panama Canal a little bit and see if we can push some of that fleet through there. I mean, we built it for a reason.
Yeah, well, and I imagine that's what's going to happen is there's going to be some diverting of, some of these major shipping companies are going to start diverting their cargo to other places. They're going to change their shipping routes, I imagine. I mean, it might happen. Like the thing is a lot of these shipping routes are built in. So they're kind of automatically there, and it's not just one company that does it. A lot of these companies put their containers on other ships. They work together to make sure things move. So it is not something that can change in a dime. But in emergencies, we saw it last year when the Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal. Some ships went literally around the bottom of South Africa, like the old school Magellan days, right?
Yeah.
And that was the way to get cargo moving. And then it's a gamble, right? It's like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, it adds X number of days, but how many days is this ship going to be stuck on the Suez? So it's a gamble.
There's the trade-off.
You're going to have to think about that. Like, I'm not super into the whole, I don't really, I'm not super into the actual logistical shipping lanes of it, like how those work and how those are just, how those can be adjusted. Again, most things in shipping, it's a large ship. It's a large ship, small rudder. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to move it one way or the other. And that is
it's a trade-off, because you could add truckers to the road. We have licensed truckers who quit the industry. We have a lot. Like, this is when I brought up that there's a trucker shortage. I had truckers saying, we're not sure we have enough people. I'm like, well, you don't have enough people to suffice the demand that we have that we need truckers right now. They said, well, people quit the industry, so they're licensed, but they're not active. And I'm like, because it comes down to pay and benefits and stuff like that. So companies can spend. It's going to show up still on the back end.
There's going to be hiring going on. Trust me, there will be hiring going on for truck drivers. And, I think it's not going to be an easy solve. It's not going to be something that happens quickly. But just so you know, and this is like, shipping survived 2 world wars. It survived the Spanish flu. It survived 9/11. Ships will keep moving. Containers will keep arriving. It's just a matter of breaking the bottleneck and getting them here quicker and more efficiently. Yep. We can start working on that stuff. And I really think there's solutions out there that both the private industry, like you said, hiring more truckers, paying a little bit better, getting those people back on the roads. Yep. That's something that can be happening, as well as there is a role, because in international trade, the government does play a role. It's just the way it is. As Absolutely. Libertarian as I am, there is a role for government to play in international trade. It does not happen just magically. So
I mean, a lot of this comes down. I mean, COVID wreaked havoc on a lot of this, and it doesn't help that you have somebody that's, you have Pete Buttigieg, who is not qualified for the position, was only hired because he's gay, and that's what happens. That's what tends to happen.
I haven't think it was
people like
because he was gay and popular. With
that's true.
Base. He's young, photogenic. He picks off a lot of boxes for someone. But you're right. But transportation secretary, I don't know how well did he do the roads in South Bend? Like how, like what did he really do to say that? Like there's probably
does he
probably think of a list of 1,000 people. There's probably a list of 100 LGBT people who are more qualified to be transportation secretary than Pete Buttigieg. He
was hired for optics, and that is the biggest thing with it. Hell, I could go in there and do a lot better job than this. Like I said, I mean, my degree is in logistics management, and I did 7 years in the Army. Now, I'll tell you that, like you said, National Guard, and we're not fighting in Afghanistan anymore, so we have some sustainment brigades that could absolutely go, and we have training in port openings, like, because we can open our own ports and stuff like that. So that's interesting that they haven't even tapped into that resource of a sustainment brigade opening ports on the East Coast. It'd be interesting. And my one of my my first battalion commander, actually a mentor of mine, is the commander of the department or the Defense Logistics Agency. So maybe I should reach out to him. I don't know.
You ever want to talk to somebody about military logistics? Just a side note here. You want to talk to somebody about military logistics? Ken Armstrong, he ran for president and VP last election cycle for the LP. He did logistics for the Coast Guard. So he's a great guy to talk about that kind of stuff. He worked out in the Pelagie Islands, I believe is where it was. But cool dude. Side note, but and
it is interesting. I mean, you have to be creative as a military logistician, because you have to be able to go into austere environments again and open up your own ports. I was in the 101st and the 82nd, so a lot of our stuff had to be done by air. In the 82nd, you had to jump into an area of operations, into a airfield, secure it so you can start bringing in logistics, and that's the type of coordination that we used to do. So there's a lot that can happen. Like I said, we trained even in the captain's career course on how to pick a spot for a port of entry to bring in tanks and everything like that. So they have the equipment. They know they can do it. There's a boat crew in Hawaii that can there's that they can open up ports for them to be able to carry cargo as well, but that's not really the issue. It's more the unloading issue and everything like that. But be interesting to see what they can do.
We are getting about towards the hour mark, and I do want to make sure I plug some things.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I'm the chair of Libertarian Party of Atlanta. So if you are a libertarian who lives in the Atlanta area, Sunday, we'll be doing our park cleanup. We do it every first Sunday of the month at Phoenix 2 Park from 12 to 1. It is a way, we've adopted the park, and it is a way for us to show that libertarians believe in getting out there and doing the work ourselves, not asking government to clean up the green spaces. We can make sure our parks are nice and clean without having a failing government system provide that for us at the expense of the taxpayer. We can do it ourselves. And that's one way to live the libertarian philosophy. We do our monthly meetings at Manuel's Tavern, the second Sunday of every month. So that'll be not this coming Sunday. Let me pull my calendar. That will be Sunday the 14th. Yeah, Sunday the 14th from 2 to 4. So come on out to Manuel's, meet up. In December, we're actually going to do our LP of Atlanta convention at Manuel's. That'll be the second Sunday of December, where I'm hoping some folks will show up who want to be the next chair and vice chair and so on of LP Atlanta, because I have plans for 2022. Also, I no longer technically live in Atlanta, so I would really like it if somebody who is in Atlanta could come out and kind of take the reins of that fledgling affiliate and grow it to the prominence that it deserves to be grown to. I also want to shout out one more organization that I work for. I'm the fundraising director of Outright Libertarians. We are a group. We are a nonprofit whose purpose is to bridge the divide between the LGBT community and the Libertarian Party. We seek to educate the LGBT community about liberty and educate libertarians about the LGBT community so that they can, at least use the right language and kind of approach things and know how to talk to LGBT people. Some people have never met LGBT people, amazingly enough, or maybe they just don't know. But regardless, we're trying to bridge that gap. So Outright Libertarians, you can follow them on Twitter. They're also at Outright USA. Please join, be a donor. I'm the fundraising director. Every dollar we make looks good on me. So join them, give them money. And then last but not least, follow me on Facebook at Chase Oliver-Libertarian. You're going to see a lot more political stuff coming out of that page soon as 2022 gears up. And at Chase for Liberty on Twitter. I'm finally active on Twitter. I was hesitant for like 10 years and I finally got into Twitter this year. So there we are. But yeah, that's my plugs. But my main thing that I want to give out to anybody is get involved in the Libertarian Party. If you're someone who believes in liberty, be it in your the national party, your state party, your local affiliate, please get involved. Please remember that we have a lot more in common than we have in differences in our party. There will be infighting. There's always infighting in every party. But basically, try to approach each other, put each other in each other's shoes, be respectful, love each other. And that's how we're going to win the day. And that's how we're going to set the world free in our lifetime is together, harnessing the energy of like love and compassion and empathy. That's how we're going to win. That's how the world will be set free. And that's going to be my message throughout 2022. So if you also want to get involved in that,
perfect.
Get with me. I'm going to be needing volunteers and people all across the state.
Yep. And that goes with anybody, no matter where you're at. I was actually just having the same conversation on Twitter yesterday. People getting discouraged because they see the online infighting. And if you watch my interview with Spike a few months ago, that's part of our issues and that pushes people away from the party. But remember, when you actually go meet people in person, like we do at Wells, I've been up there a couple times as well. It takes a lot of that miscommunication that happens online. It also takes away, it humanizes people, I think, too many times when you just see writing on a keyboard. They're not like, you don't think of them as a person when you're attacking them. You think of them as their ideology. And so that's never helpful and it drives people away. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I like to go up to Manuel's. I won't be doing much because, and my channel might even be taking a little bit of a break because I will be flying to Austin next Saturday for surgery. And then, but you guys can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, Sara Higdon _. I'll kind of be like providing updates and stuff on there as to where I'm at and what's going on with this channel. Make sure you guys click the like and subscribe button below here. And then come back Tuesday, I have, it's probably the most important video I have ever done on this channel and will probably do for a very, very long time. I'm having human trafficking survivor and advocate Eliza Blue on. We are raising money for trafficking organizations or anti-trafficking organizations. So come join, get into the chat. It's really an important one. It's at 7:00 on Tuesday, and I will see you guys next time.
Peace out.